Hello, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jimmy Licauco, broadcasting live from Paranaque on Inner Mind Online. That's what we're calling this program. We cannot always do this every Tuesday. Once in a while, we may be out of the air, depending on whether we can have enough time for this. But this afternoon, I would like to discuss with you something that's not really discussed often on the air or radio or television. It's on the topic of sacred sex, what really happened in the Garden of Eden. And then we shall proceed to a discussion of Tantra yoga of sex. But because of the nature of this, the content of this topic, maybe we should be limited to adults only for both those 18 and above. Okay. But then, our society is becoming more open to these things, and it's difficult to control this. But it is important that we discuss this on a higher level. This sex is not often discussed in this manner. And it's some secret societies in the East know about it, in Tibet, in India, and ancient Greece. This is something that is known to them, because this is very sacred and known only to the high priests before. So let's talk about what really happened there in the Garden of Eden. It's a very controversial topic. No, I'm reading this from an article that I wrote in 1980 in the magazine that I edited in 1980, which is Body, Mind, and Spirit. And this is an interesting wooden, what do you call that? Woodcut. Very ancient woodcut of Adam and Eve. Okay, let's proceed. We all know the familiar story about creation. God created the first human beings, called Adam and Eve, placed them in a beautiful garden called Eden, or paradise, and told them they can eat everything that's there except the forbidden fruit. Eve was tempted by the devil and ate the forbidden fruit and asked Adam to do the same. As a consequence, they were both punished by God, banished from paradise. But if you read Genesis in the Bible, you won't find any reference to an apple or an actual fruit that God forbade them to eat. What God said was this: you may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it's a tree of knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat it, you shall die. You'll find this in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 to 17. There have been a lot of speculation and intellectual controversy about what really happened in Eden. What is this knowledge of good and evil, or this fruit also? Surely it does not refer to an actual tree, because it's a tree of knowledge. It's a tree of knowledge of good and evil. It is not an acacia tree or an apple tree. Okay? It's just a tree of knowledge. It is something that if you eat or partake of its fruit, it gives you the knowledge, something you did not know before. Eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge apparently led to divine knowledge, the knowledge that God alone knew and that man was not yet to know. They defied God's command not to partake of this knowledge yet. So they were severely punished by being driven out of Eden. But let us go back to the original question. What really was this fruit all about? If it was not a real, actual botanical fruit, some esoteric schools say it referred to sacred sex, the correct practice of which can bring about supernatural knowledge or opening up to higher states of consciousness for which Adam and Eve were not ready. So that's one interpretation of this, which is not, you don't hear these things often. No. The old mystics and mystery schools of the East have always maintained and taught that there was more to sex than merely joining two sex organs together and achieving climax or orgasm. For even lower animals can do that. No, indeed, sex must have a higher, more mystical purpose than that. Let us explore this revolutionary concept further and see whether modern people like us can understand it. The great physician and Nobel Prize awardee, Alexis Carrel, in his classic book, Man the Unknown, this is an old book, maybe in the 1950s, posed the question of why it needs so many millions of semen to impregnate one egg of female. He said, since nature is not capricious and does not produce anything in excess of what is necessary to achieve its objective, then there must be a reason such an excess of overabundance or overabundance of sperm in man. There must be some other reason, he says. And he felt that the answer to this is to ensure the preservation and continuation of the species. The Russian mathematician and mystic, one of my favorite authors actually, P.D. Uspensky, who was a follower of Gurdjieff, went even a step further. He said that the hidden and ultimate goal of sex is the transformation of man into Superman, something almost divine or godlike. For this to happen, sex must have the capability of transmuting the sex energy into a higher energy that opens up to higher states of consciousness. The great secret of secrets is to cultivate sexual energy to reach such states. There are many roads to higher consciousness, to divine knowledge. The route through sex is the most powerful. It's the most powerful one, and therefore it is the most suppressed and the most misunderstood. Instead of trying to understand its true nature, sex has been relegated to the background and hidden in the closets under lock and key. The result is a very superficial understanding of sex that is limited to the mechanical and the enhancement of the sensual to mere sexual techniques. Rather than to the transformation of the sex energy into spiritual energy. But as the well-known but controversial Indian guru Osho, whose real name is Bhagwan Rajneesh Bhagwan, pointed out in his book, From Sex to Superconsciousness, and I quote, what did he say? Even after a lifetime experience, we never reach anywhere near the supreme stage, near the divinity. Why? A man reaches a ripe old age, comes to the end of his life, but he is never free from his lust for sex, from his passion for intercourse. Why? It's because he has never understood nor been told about the art of sex, about the science of sex. He has never considered it. He has never discussed it. He has never, he has never discussed it with the enlightened ones, unquote. And that's why sex has mainly remained, for the majority, merely a biological act rather than a spiritual or sacred act that it was really meant to be. Ouspensky pointed out that in those cultures that have not come under the influence of Western ecclesiastical authorities, this hidden purpose of sex had always been known by the initiates and their priests. In such societies, sex, rather than being condemned as unregarded, is regarded as the expression of the divinity in man and is an act of worship. Can you imagine that? In the temple at Khajuraho, India, in India, in Khajuraho, there's a temple in which all positions of the sex act are sculptured on its stone facade. The Western Christian eyes looking at this fully exposed genital anatomy cannot help but be shocked at the sight. He is not used to it. His whole cultural and religious orientation goes against such public display of intimacy. But to the tantric practitioners of yoga, these are but natural expressions of a basic human emotion, and there can be nothing morally wrong with it. Here is an example of one of the sculptures. Let me see. It's there. And there are many of these in all positions that are depicted in the temple. And it's what's a temple? The temple is a place of prayer. And the ones who did this, I understand, were priests of this Hindu or Buddhist religion. In fact, the Western way of suppressing sexual expression has led to so much perversity and criminality of the worst types, which are unknown in the ancient Orientals, who do not regard any natural expression of the sexual act to be immoral or perverted or wrong. Those who see the naked statues of couples in various positions of sexual intercourse in the temple of Khajuraho experienced two wonderful phenomena, according to Bhagwan Rajneesh or Osho. First, even after seeing the images of naked couples performing intercourse, they will not feel a sense of vulgarity, neither would they see anything ugly or bad in the copulating images. And second, they will experience a sense of peace. A feeling of sacredness envelops them, and their reaction will even surprise them. According to Osho, The visionaries who created the statues were people who had seen and known spiritual sex intimately. They had one aim, and it was that the people would sit in front of the statues and meditate on them. They would be freed from lust. For thousands of years, these images have been objects of meditation. It sets a wonderful example for the oversexed to meditate on the temples of Khajuraho and lose themselves in them. So there are many ways of looking into this matter, and unfortunately, we've not really regarded this as part of spirituality. There is such a thing as sacred sex, and in ancient times, in ancient Greece, there are what's known as sacred prostitutes, or those who have a very high knowledge of this, and they are well regarded in society. They are not banned, they are not immoral, because they know that they were doing something which is, in a way, very religious. Now, it's for us very surprising to hear this, but it existed during those ancient times, and perhaps still do in certain, not in Greece anymore, but maybe probably in India, probably in China, I don't know. But this is something that has been there for a long time. Okay, I think that will be enough for today. I will um, keep the other topics on Tantra Yoga of Sex. It's pretty long for next time. So I have to end this time, and we'll see whether we can be back on Tuesday to discuss Tantra Yoga of Sex. Thank you.